The floodlights hit her face, and that's when I knew she'd gone too far. Hundreds of strangers danced under neon lights on my private beach. Music thundered through the night, shaking the dunes I'd spent decades protecting. At the center of it all stood Heather Greer, cocktail in hand, shouting into a mic, "Welcome to my beach party." Except it wasn't hers. It was mine. And that night, she turned my peace into chaos. You're watching Tomato Tales, where every story burns brighter than revenge itself. Now, let's rewind to where this nightmare started. My name's Marcus Hale, and I own a small, private stretch of sand along Coral Ridge, a place where time moves slow, and the ocean still sounds like peace. My wife Lena and I spent years restoring those dunes, planting sea oats, roping off the area to protect it. It wasn't just land. It was legacy. Then came Heather Greer, newly elected president of the Coral Ridge HOA, a woman with a perfect smile and a voice that could cut glass. She wanted power, not harmony. And once she had a taste of it, she started treating everyone's property like her personal project. First, it was complaints about mailbox paint, then lawn length. Then one day I found a glossy flyer in my mailbox, Coral Ridge Glow Gala, hosted by the HOA. Location, private beach. Zuthdun my address. I walked straight to her mansion, a marble monument to ego, and she opened the door. Pomeranian trembling, grin locked in place. "Heather," I said, holding up the flyer, "this event is listed on my land." "Oh, Marcus," she purred, "don't be so possessive. The community deserves access. That sand just sits there doing nothing." "That nothing," I told her, "is the only thing keeping your house from being ocean property during a storm." She waved a sheet of paper in my face. "We have a permit." It looked official, until I saw the header, Greer Beautification Committee. She had literally signed her own approval. I took one photo of that fake permit. That single click was the spark that would burn everything she'd built. Because the next night she brought in trucks, lights, speakers, even a bulldozer. And when nature decided to fight back, her Glow Gala turned into a disaster zone. Hit subscribe and join me on Tomato Tales, where every story starts calm and ends in chaos. By sunset the next evening, my quiet slice of coast had transformed into a construction zone. 3 trucks rolled in, one carrying stage equipment, another loaded with lights and sound gear, and the last hauling what looked like industrial-grade foam machines. They parked along the public access road, but their crew didn't stop there. Within minutes, they were stomping right over my rope line, dragging cables and platforms through the fragile dune grass I'd spent years restoring. I stepped out from my porch, camera already in hand. "Morning, fellas," I called, trying to sound calm. "You realize you're on private property?" The foreman, a thick-necked man with a clipboard and a permanent sunburn, barely looked at me. "Talk to Mrs. Greer," he said. "She's got the permit." He waved the paper like it meant something. I raised my phone and started recording. "That's not a county permit," I said. "That's a forgery." "You're trespassing," he smirked. "Then call the cops." So I did. An hour later, a young deputy showed up, and the kind who still thought sunglasses made him look older. He strolled down the beach, hands on his hips, surveying the chaos like it was a routine noise complaint. I explained everything. The deed, the fake permit, the equipment tearing through the dune grass. I even showed him the video. He nodded slowly, unimpressed. "Sir, this sounds like an HOA dispute," he said. "We don't usually get involved in civil matters." I pointed toward the dune where heavy speakers were being mounted on fragile sand. "They're destroying protected habitat. That's not civil, that's criminal." He shrugged. "Unless someone gets hurt, my hands are tied." And right on cue, Heather Greer strutted down the beach like it was her runway. Flowing white dress, oversized sunglasses, perfect hair catching the breeze. "Officer," she sang, "thank heavens you're here. This man is harassing my workers." The deputy's posture changed instantly. "Yes, ma'am." Heather smiled, all charm and poison. "Just a misunderstanding," she said sweetly. "The community approved this event. Marcus is just passionate." I could see the officer folding under her tone. He wasn't seeing truth, he was seeing power. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just hit record again. By the time the deputy left, the trucks were already unloading crates of alcohol and floodlights. The music tests began, thudding bass rolling across the sand, vibrating through the deck boards of my house. My wife, Lena, stood behind me on the porch, her voice low. "Are you sure you want to fight this?" I didn't answer right away. I watched the lights flicker, the stage rise, the people laughing as they trampled the last patch of sea oats near the dunes. Then I said quietly, "She wants a show. She'll get one, because if the law wouldn't stop her, the storm that was brewing offshore just might." As darkness fell, the wind began to howl, and Heather Greer's Glow Gala turned into a nightmare no one saw coming. The party started just after sunset. From my deck, I could see everything. The floodlights glowing blue against the waves, the pounding bass shaking the air like distant thunder. It wasn't just a party anymore. It was an invasion. Dozens became hundreds. People poured onto the sand, barefoot, half-drunk, dressed in neon and white. They set up coolers, fire pits, and beach chairs, completely ignoring the private property signs fluttering in the wind. At the center of it all, Heather Greer stood on her makeshift stage, microphone in hand, grinning like she owned the tide. "Welcome to the first annual Greer Gala," she shouted. "Our beach, our rules." I could feel my jaw tighten. She didn't even call it my land anymore. She'd rebranded it as Our Beach, as if I'd never existed. Beside me, Lena whispered, "Marcus, she's not stopping." This is insane, but I just adjusted my camera. "Let her talk," I said. "The more she says, the deeper she digs. Every drunk laugh, every footprint in the dune grass. I caught it all in 4K. Because this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about proof. Around 9, I noticed something far out on the horizon, a dark bruise spreading across the sky. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, cutting through the humid air. The sea started to churn. I checked the weather radar on my phone. A thunderstorm had formed unexpectedly offshore, fast, fierce, and heading straight for us. And yet the music got louder. The crowd was too busy dancing to notice the warning signs flashing in the distance. That's when my Uncle Mitch called, a retired land surveyor, old school and stubborn. The kind of man who believed rules meant something. "Heard your HOA queen's causing trouble," he said. "You could say that," I muttered, watching the crowd spill closer to the dunes. "You got your survey markers still in the ground?" he asked. "Yeah, all 4 iron rods, same as 30 years ago." "Good," he said. "Don't let her move 'em. In this state, touching a survey marker's a felony. Remember that?" I hung up, staring at those metal stakes half buried in the sand. They were more than just boundaries now. They were my last line of defense. By 10 p.m., the storm was nearly on top of us. Lightning flickered like strobe lights in the distance. The DJ shouted over the wind, "Let's get this party started." A second later, the heavens split open. Rain came down in sheets, instantly drenching everyone. The wind howled like a living thing, ripping banners off poles, toppling drink tents. Screams replaced laughter. And then, the power cut. The beach went black except for the frantic flashes of lightning. People panicked, stumbling over chairs and cables, slipping in the wet sand. From my deck, I watched chaos unfold, hundreds running blindly toward the dunes for shelter. Right into the fragile slope I'd built, tearing through the sea oats, trampling everything in sight. The dunes were fighting back now, collapsing under their weight, swallowing their party. And through the sheets of rain, I saw her, Heather, standing frozen by the stage, her microphone gone, her perfect white dress plastered to her skin. For once she looked small, helpless. But the worst wasn't over, because in the storm's chaos, something far more fragile was being destroyed, and it would turn her little party into a federal crime. When the storm finally broke, the beach looked like a battlefield. Plastic cups floated in puddles, speakers lay half buried in sand, and the once golden dunes were carved open, deep scars running down their sides. The waves had swallowed part of the stage, dragging cables and lights into the sea, but that wasn't the worst part. As dawn crept over the horizon, I walked down from my deck, camera in hand, shoes sinking into the soaked sand. The air smelled of salt and electricity. Heather's glow gala had become a crime scene without her even realizing it yet. Then I saw it, half buried near the collapsed section of the dune. A small mound of shells and broken sticks, a sea turtle nest. The storm had exposed it, or rather, the crowd had. Their stomping, digging, and drunken chaos had crushed most of it. Tiny, shattered eggs glistened under the morning sun. For a long moment I couldn't move. All I could hear was the surf, slow, angry, relentless. Lena came up beside me, her voice cracking. "Oh God, Marcus." "They destroyed it." I crouched down, my hand shaking as I brushed away the sand. "This was protected habitat," I said quietly. This isn't just vandalism. It's federal." That's when the camera clicked, the sound sharp and deliberate. Heather stood a few yards away, her phone raised, her expression pale but defiant. "Marcus," she said, "don't make this into something it's not." I turned slowly toward her, raincoat dripping. "Something it's not? You just turned a nesting site into a dance floor." She hesitated, glancing around. Most of her crew was gone. The volunteers cleaning up what they could. The storm had wrecked everything, and so had she. "We'll fix it," she said weakly. "The HOA will restore the area." "You can't restore life, Heather," I said. "You killed it." Her mask cracked just for a second. Then came that same sharp smile. "You don't have proof it was us." I held up my camera. "Oh, I've got hours of proof." That was the moment she realized she wasn't just facing an angry neighbor. She was facing evidence. Real, legal, damning evidence. But Heather wasn't the type to back down. She turned away, dialing someone on her phone. Her voice carried faintly over the wind. "Get the HOA lawyer now." I didn't chase her. I didn't yell. I just stood there among the broken shells, the destroyed dune, and the remnants of her glow gala. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt resolve, because what she didn't know was that I'd already sent copies of those videos, every clip, every timestamp, to someone who'd make sure justice didn't stop at county lines. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of my house. Government plates, tinted windows, and an emblem I hadn't seen in years. 2 days after the storm, I heard the crunch of tires on wet gravel. When I looked out my window, a black SUV had stopped by my gate, the kind with tinted glass and quiet authority. 2 men stepped out. Both wore windbreakers with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service emblem stitched on the shoulder. One of them, tall, clean-shaven, late 40s, flashed a badge as I approached. "Mr. Hale, I'm Special Agent Porter. We received a report of an unauthorized event on federally protected shoreline." I didn't waste time. "I've got footage," I said. "Everything from setup to destruction." He nodded. "Good, we'll need copies. And names." I handed him a folder I'd spent all night preparing. Photos, timestamps, video stills, even a copy of Heather's fake permit. As he flipped through it, his brow furrowed. "Who's Heather Greer?" he asked. "President of the Coral Ridge HOA," I said. "She hosted an event here without consent. Over 200 guests. Destroyed a turtle nesting site." Porter exchanged a glance with his partner. "That's not an HOA issue anymore. That's a federal wildlife violation, and possible fraud if she forged documentation." He looked up at me. "Did she know about the nest?" I thought about it. The way she'd waived that fake permit. The confidence in her voice, the arrogance in her smile. She knew, I said. She just didn't care. By the afternoon, Heather's mansion was swarming with black SUVs and uniformed officers. The entire neighborhood buzzed with whispers. People filming from their porches, pretending to water their lawns while catching every second on their phones. I stood at a distance, camera in hand again. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part, strangely empty. Because justice doesn't feel like victory when you realize it had to come to this. Heather stepped out onto her driveway, her hair pulled back tight, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. She looked calm, too calm. Agents surrounded her, talking fast. One of them read from a document while she crossed her arms, unimpressed. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I am the permit authority for this neighborhood." Agent Porter spoke evenly. "Not for federally protected dunes, ma'am. You don't have that jurisdiction. Do you know who my husband is?" She fired back. "Ma'am," he said, "I know exactly who you are. That's why we're here." He gestured to her security cameras. "Federal law requires full access to footage of the event. If it's deleted, that's obstruction." For the first time, she faltered. Just a flicker, a flash of fear breaking through that perfect composure. She turned her head slightly, and for one split second, her eyes met mine across the road. The wind picked up her hair, and she looked like she was standing in the ruins of her own empire. And I realized she wasn't done yet. People like Heather never go down quietly. That evening, Porter called me again. "We've opened a case. She's lawyering up. If you get contacted, record everything." I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since dawn. "What happens now?" He paused for a moment. "Now," he said, "now we see how deep this goes." 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the government, but from Heather's lawyer. And this time I was the one being accused. The letter came in a thick white envelope, sealed with gold trim and arrogance. The kind of stationery people like Heather use to make themselves feel untouchable. First, I thought it was another HOA notice, some petty attempt at intimidation. But when I opened it, my hands went cold. Cease and desist, defamation and harassment. According to her attorney, I had knowingly spread false information about Heather Greer, illegally recorded private property, and caused emotional distress and reputational damage. They demanded I delete all videos, issue a public apology and pay damages or face a lawsuit. Lena found me sitting at the kitchen table, letter trembling in my hand. "Another threat?" she asked quietly. "Not just a threat," I said. "She's turning this into war." That afternoon, I called Agent Porter. He listened in silence, then sighed. "She's trying to get ahead of the investigation," he said. "If she can make you look unstable or vindictive, she can muddy the evidence. So, what do I do?" "Nothing," he replied. "Don't react. Don't post. Don't respond. Let her hang herself. But that's easier said than done when your name starts spreading through every group chat and Facebook page in your town." Within days, rumors exploded. Neighbors whispered that I'd fabricated the turtle nest story for attention. Someone anonymously posted a video online, a clipped version of my footage, edited to make it look like I'd yelled at volunteers for no reason. Even local news picked it up. HOA president accused of beach damage. Homeowner under investigation for harassment. I watched the broadcast in disbelief. Heather was on screen, sitting elegantly in her marble kitchen, a victim in pearls. "It's tragic," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound human. "All I wanted was to bring the community together. Instead, I've been bullied and defamed by someone who refuses to cooperate." Then they showed a photo of me, grainy, unflattering, from a distance. The villain of her story. Lena muted the TV, her face pale. "She's flipping the narrative." I nodded slowly. "She's not fighting the law. She's fighting perception." That night I went through every file, every timestamp, every raw clip I'd taken. I built folders, labeled evidence, double-checked everything for authenticity. If she wanted a war of optics, fine. But I wasn't going to play defense, because the truth had one thing she didn't: patience. The next morning, Porter called again. "She's not just panicking," he said. "We found something. Her Greer Beautification Committee isn't a registered entity." She forged the signature line. "That's wire fraud if she sent those permits digitally." For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide shift. I looked out at the beach, the same stretch of sand that had started all this, and I smiled. "Then it's her move next," I said, "and I'm done playing fair." The following week, a public hearing was scheduled. HOA board versus federal agents, with me caught in the middle. And when Heather walked into that room, she had no idea what I'd brought with me. The Coral Ridge Clubhouse had never seen a crowd like that. Every seat was taken. Neighbors, reporters, HOA members, and even a few people live streaming from their phones. The air was thick with whispers and the hum of fluorescent lights. At the front of the room sat a folding table, where the HOA board usually debated things like landscaping budgets and mailbox designs. But today it was a battlefield. On one side, Heather Greer, flanked by her attorney, a slick gray-haired man in an expensive suit who looked like he billed by the minute. On the other, Agent Porter and his federal counterpart. Papers stacked neatly, expressions cold and unreadable. And in the middle, between the two, sat the HOA chair. A frail man named Mr. Landon tapped his microphone. "All right, everyone. This emergency session concerns the investigation into the Coral Ridge Gala event. We'll hear statements from both parties." Heather leaned into her mic first, perfectly poised. "Thank you, Mr. Landon. I want to start by saying that this entire situation has been blown out of proportion. The event was approved by our board. The storm was an act of nature, not negligence. And as for the accusations of habitat destruction, those are unfounded and cruel." She paused, eyes sweeping the audience like a performer soaking up applause. "I've spent years serving this community. I love Coral Ridge. I would never endanger it." Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Her lawyer nodded, sliding a document across the table toward the board. "Proof of authorization," he said smoothly. Porter leaned forward. "Permission from whom?" Heather's lawyer smiled. "From the Greer Beautification Committee, Mrs. Greer's initiative, established to enhance community spaces." Porter opened the folder in front of him. "Except, sir," he said, "that committee doesn't legally exist. We confirmed with the county registrar. No record, no tax ID, no filings, which means every document she produced was fraudulent." A wave of gasps moved through the room. Heather's smile froze, but she didn't break. "That's absurd," she said quickly. "It's a volunteer group. We didn't need registration." Porter slid another photo across the table. "A still frame from my video." "Then explain this," he said. "Over 200 guests, commercial sponsors, alcohol sales, and right there the destruction of a federally protected turtle nest." Heather's face drained of color. The attorney spoke up fast. "Objection. That footage is invasive, captured on private property without consent." Porter didn't flinch. "Federally protected land," he said coolly. "Once she crossed that boundary, it stopped being private." The room went silent. For the first time, Heather looked small, her confidence faltering as whispers rippled through the crowd again. I sat quietly, watching her fight to keep her composure. She looked my way once, eyes cold, desperate, calculating. There was no apology there, just hatred. Mr. Landon cleared his throat. "Given the findings, this board will temporarily suspend Mrs. Greer's position pending further investigation." Heather stood abruptly, voice sharp. "You can't do that." "This is my association," Landon sighed. "Not anymore, Heather." The audience erupted, half in shock, half in quiet satisfaction. She turned toward me one last time before storming out. Her words were barely audible, but I caught them. "This isn't over, Marcus." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because I knew she was right. People like Heather don't disappear quietly. They regroup. That night, long after the meeting ended, I found tire tracks leading down toward my dunes, fresh ones. And the next morning, something was waiting on my porch that told me she was just getting started. The night after the hearing, the storm had passed, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than thunder. The beach was eerily calm. The dunes still bore the scars of her party, and though the ocean whispered gently, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Around midnight, I heard tires crunching over gravel. Headlights swept across my porch for a brief second, then vanished down the road. I went out with a flashlight, nothing. But when I looked down near the steps, I saw something sitting on the welcome mat. A single white envelope. No postage, no name, just my address, scrawled in looping handwriting that I knew too well. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed from an email. Dear Mr. Hale, this letter is to inform you that your property boundaries are being reviewed by the Coral Ridge Development Council. A reassessment of ownership lines is under evaluation. At the bottom, someone had typed, anonymous submission. Marcus Hale's deed may be invalid. There was no official seal, no contact information, just enough to sound legitimate to anyone who didn't know better. Heather, Lena found me staring at it an hour later, the paper trembling in my hands. She's not giving up, she said softly. No, I replied, she's changing tactics. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. The clerk at the front desk, an older woman named Denise, had known me for years. When I handed her the paper, she frowned. This isn't from us, she said immediately. We don't use this header, and there's no development council here, so it's fake? I asked, completely. Someone's trying to spook you. I nodded, sliding the paper back into the envelope. Then it's working. That night, the messages started. At first, just a few anonymous comments under my videos. Liar. Stop destroying reputations. Maybe the HOA was right. Then came the emails, dozens of them, from random accounts accusing me of falsifying evidence, of hating the community, of ruining a woman's life. I recognized the phrasing. Same tone, same arrogance. Heather's writing disguised behind fake names. She wasn't fighting me in the open anymore. She was poisoning the water, turning neighbors into weapons. Lena begged me to ignore it. She wants a reaction, she said. Don't give her one. But it wasn't easy. Because late one night while going through my inbox, I found one email that wasn't from her. It was from Agent Porter. Marcus, we've uncovered something you'll want to see. It involves Heather's finances and the HOA's missing funds. Don't respond to her. Just keep recording everything. I read it twice, then 3 times. Heather wasn't just playing dirty. She was hiding something much bigger. The next morning, I checked my front porch camera footage and froze. 2:43 a.m. A figure in a white coat had walked up my driveway, stared directly into the lens, and smiled. Heather. She didn't leave anything this time, just the look. That silent message burned clearer than words. You're not safe. 2 days later, Agent Porter called again. He wanted me downtown. Urgent meeting. What he told me there would blow this entire story wide open. When Agent Porter called, his voice carried that clipped urgency that meant something big had surfaced. Marcus, he said, we've got the paperwork. And it's worse than we thought. By the time I reached the federal field office downtown, the rain had started again. The kind that never feels natural. Like the sky itself is restless. Inside, the air was cold and dry. Porter was waiting in a small conference room with a folder so thick it could have been a novel. He motioned for me to sit. Everything we found ties back to the HOA, he began. Heather's been embezzling funds for over a year. Beautification projects, landscaping invoices, phantom maintenance contracts. We traced the payments to shell companies registered under her maiden name. He flipped the folder open. Inside were copies of checks, bank statements, and emails. In one, Heather had approved a $75,000 coastal restoration grant. The recipient? Greer Coastal Services, a business that didn't exist outside her laptop. I sat back slowly. So she used HOA money to fund her own party? Porter nodded, and then some. The sound system, the caterers, even the rental trucks, all paid through the association's accounts. He pushed a photo across the table, a shot of a spreadsheet, Heather's signature at the bottom. Every dollar she spent trying to look powerful, he said, came from her neighbor's pockets. The weight of it hit me like a tide. She hadn't just trampled dunes. She'd built her empire on lies, on the trust of people who thought she was helping them. Is this enough to charge her? I asked. Porter hesitated. For fraud? Absolutely. But for the wildlife destruction, we need to prove intent. She's claiming ignorance, says the nest was uncovered after the event. I clenched my jaw. She knew, I said. She told me the dunes were just sand. She didn't care. Porter nodded. Then we'll need her on record admitting it. One clean confession, or one document where she contradicts herself. He closed the folder and slid it toward me. Marcus, you're the only one she'll talk to. She still thinks she can intimidate you. Who's that? That night I sat at my desk with the folder spread open before me. The rain pounded against the window, the same rhythm that had haunted the first storm. Every file, every receipt, every signature was another piece of her empire unraveling. Lena came in quietly, setting a mug of coffee beside me. You're really going after her, aren't you? I looked up at her. She went after everyone else first. She nodded softly. Then finish it. But be careful, Marcus. People like her, when they start losing power, they get dangerous. By morning, I had a plan. If Heather wanted to keep pretending she was untouchable, I'd let her, just long enough for her to say something she couldn't take back. I hit record on my phone, opened a blank email, and started typing, Heather, we need to talk. About the dunes. About the funds. Meet me tomorrow at the Boardwalk Cafe, 2 p.m. I hovered over the send button, my pulse steady, the ocean roaring faintly outside. Then I pressed send. The trap was set. The next day she showed up, calm, smiling, dressed like she'd already won. But when she sat across from me at that cafe, I realized the mask wasn't just slipping, it was cracking. The cafe was quiet that afternoon, the kind of stillness that feels staged, like the world knows something important is about to happen. The smell of coffee mingled with sea salt drifting through the open windows. I'd chosen a corner table with a clear view of the door. My phone, camera already rolling, sat propped up against a sugar jar. Then she walked in. Heather Greer, immaculate as ever. White blazer, silk scarf, sunglasses too large for the cloudy weather. She smiled as if she were greeting an old friend instead of the man who'd helped bring her empire down. Marcus, she said smoothly, taking the seat across from me. I almost didn't come. I knew you would, I said quietly. You hate unfinished conversations. She laughed in soft, brittle. Still think you've got me figured out, huh? For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence stretched thin. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. You know what your problem is? You can't let go. You think everything has to be a battle. The dunes, the HOA, me. I kept my gaze steady. It became a battle when you broke the law. Her smile twitched. Is that what you think this is about, laws? She said, voice dropping to a whisper. I built something beautiful. I gave people something to belong to. And you, she gestured at me, dismissive. You tore it down because you couldn't stand not being in control. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my tone calm. Control? You forged documents. You destroyed a protected nesting site. You stole from your own neighbors. Her eyes flicked up sharply. That was a mistake, she said too fast. And just like that, the first crack appeared. I didn't move. I let the silence hang. She realized what she'd said, too late. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "You don't understand," she said. "It was supposed to be temporary. The money, the permits, all of it. I just needed time to fix things before anyone noticed." "Fix things," I repeated quietly. "By burying the truth." She sighed, leaning back, her mask slipping completely now. "Do you know what it's like to hold a community together? To make people respect you? They don't care about effort, Marcus. They care about image. And I gave them that. I gave them perfection. You gave them fraud," I said. Her eyes flashed and she leaned forward again. "You think you've won? You have no idea what people like me can survive. I'll rebuild. I always do." That was the moment her confidence broke for good, because she realized the recorder light on my phone was blinking. Her eyes widened. "You're recording this?" I met her gaze. "No, Heather. You're recording yourself?" She went pale. Then she stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. "This conversation never happened," she snapped, voice trembling. "Tell that to the file already in the hands of federal agents," I said. She froze. For the first time since I'd met her, Heather Greer didn't have a single word left. She turned and walked out, not like a queen losing her crown, but like a ghost retreating from daylight. I watched her go, the sound of her heels fading against the boardwalk. The ocean outside roared, as if it understood what had just shifted, because in that moment the tide finally turned. The next morning, Agent Porter called. "Heather Greer's been taken into custody," he said. "But Marcus, we found something in her files. Something with your name on it." Agent Porter's voice was grave when he called that morning. "Heather Greer's in custody," he said. "We've charged her with fraud, falsifying federal documents and environmental violations." He paused, and I could hear the hesitation. "But Marcus, there's something else." I tightened my grip on the phone. "What do you mean?" "She kept a second set of files, personal ones. Some of them are labeled with your name, and they don't make sense." An hour later, I was back at the field office, sitting across from Porter. The folder he handed me looked ordinary enough, just another beige file in a mountain of bureaucracy. But inside were printouts, photos, and forged correspondence, all designed to make me look guilty. Emails I'd never sent, screenshots of fake messages, even a doctored property deed suggesting I'd sold part of my land to Heather's development group. "She tried to frame you," Porter said, flipping through the pages. "This isn't amateur work. She planned this months ago. These documents were time-stamped before the gala." My mind reeled. "She built an escape plan," I said slowly. "If she went down, she'd take me with her." Porter nodded grimly. "Exactly. She knew we'd find her fraud eventually. She made you the scapegoat, the angry neighbor with a motive to ruin her." He pulled out a photograph from the folder, a security still from the HOA office 2 weeks before the party. Heather, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. "Who's that?" I asked. "Her accountant," Porter said. "Or so we thought. Turns out he's a consultant for a property firm in Tampa, one that's been buying up coastal lots under shell names. They were using Heather's HOA to push out small landowners, including you." The words hit me like a wave of cold water. "This was never about the dunes," I muttered. "It was about the land." Heather wasn't just greedy. She was the face of something larger. A quiet corporate land grab, hidden behind neighborhood smiles and fake fundraisers, and I had walked straight into it. "Why me?" I asked. "Because your property sits dead center on the last undeveloped stretch of coastline," Porter said. "If they'd gotten you out, they'd have the entire shore." He leaned forward. "She wasn't the mastermind, Marcus. She was the messenger." That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment. The party, the storm, the nest, the hearing. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Heather's arrogance wasn't born from power. It came from protection. Someone bigger had been backing her all along. Around midnight, I stepped outside. The wind was calm, the waves gentle. The kind of peace that feels deceptive. Then my phone buzzed, a new message. No number. Nice work, Marcus. You took down the wrong person. Attached was a photo, my house taken from the dunes. Fresh footprints in the sand. I froze, every instinct screaming. Whoever was really behind this wasn't finished. The next morning, Porter called again. Voice tight, urgent. Heather wants to talk. She says she has a deal, but she'll only speak to you. When Agent Porter called again, I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Unease. Heather requested you personally, he said. She's in federal holding downtown. Claims she has information that could expose everyone involved. I hesitated. And you believe her? Porter exhaled. I don't trust her, but I believe she's scared. 2 hours later, I found myself walking through the sterile corridors of a federal detention center. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed off the concrete walls. The air smelled like bleach and metal. Porter stopped at a small interview room. Metal table, 2 chairs, thick glass. She's waiting inside, he said quietly. Don't let her lead the conversation. She knows how to play people. Heather looked different now. The white suit was gone, replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Her hair was pulled back, her face pale, stripped of glamour. But her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes when were the same. She smiled faintly as I sat down across from her. Marcus, she said softly, you look good. Vindication suits you. I didn't reply. She leaned forward, her handcuffs clinking lightly against the table. I suppose you've heard by now. The accountants, the shell companies. They weren't mine. I was a middleman. Who were you working for? I asked. She tilted her head. You think I'll give that away for free? Porter's voice came through the intercom. Mrs. Greer, this isn't a negotiation, Heather smirked. Then you don't get what you want. She turned her eyes back to me. I can give you names, she said. Real ones. The developers. The offshore accounts. The man who told me to host that gala. To test the limits of your patience. You were bait, Marcus. They wanted you to snap. To make you look unstable enough for a forced buyout. The words hit like a gut punch. So you set me up, her expression softened, just barely. I didn't know how deep it went. I thought they wanted land, not lives. I stared at her, disbelief and anger clashing in my chest. You destroyed my dunes, Heather. You trampled a protected nest. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Her voice cracked for the first time. I know, and I'll pay for it. But if you want the people behind me, the ones who started all this, you'll have to promise me something. What? She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. Protection. Witness transfer. You get me out of here and I'll give you everything. Names, dates, accounts, proof. Porter's voice snapped through the speaker. That's not how this works. But I couldn't ignore her tone. Beneath the manipulation there was something else, a real fear. She swallowed hard. They're not done, Marcus. They'll come for you next. They already have eyes on your land. You think that message last night was random? The room fell silent. Even Porter stopped speaking. She exhaled shakily. Take my offer. Because if I disappear before the deal goes through, you'll never find them. As I left the room, Porter caught up to me in the hall. She's lying, he said. She's just trying to save herself. Maybe, I said quietly. But maybe she's telling the truth. I stepped outside into the sunlight. The ocean breeze carried faintly through the city streets. A reminder of what all this had started over. Land, greed, control. But Heather was right about one thing. This wasn't over, because someone else was already moving in the shadows. That night I got another message. No threats this time, just a single sentence. If she talks, you'll both be buried under the dunes. The message arrived just before midnight. No number, no signature, just that one line burned into my screen. If she talks, you'll both be buried under the dunes. For a long moment I just stared at it. Not scared, not even angry, just tired. Because every lie, every storm, every threat had started on that same stretch of sand. And now, somehow, it was all coming back there. The ocean was calling both of us home. The next morning I drove toward the shoreline. The sky was heavy with clouds again, thick and bruised. The kind that whispered another storm was coming. The air was still, too still. Even the gulls had gone quiet. When I reached the dunes, I saw tire tracks, fresh ones leading up the service path behind my property. And then, at the top of the ridge, a familiar figure stood waiting. Heather, no guards, no cuffs, just her. Pale, wind-tossed, eyes hollow but defiant. For a second I wondered if I was dreaming. "How did you get out?" I called. She smiled faintly. "Temporary release. Cooperation agreement." Then she looked past me toward the sea. "They told me I'd be safe once I talked." Her voice cracked on that last word. That's when I noticed the faint red dot dancing on the sand near her feet. "Get down!" I shouted. She turned just as the shot rang out. The sound tore through the wind like a scream. Heather fell to her knees, clutching her shoulder. Not dead, but hit. I dropped beside her, pulling her out of the open. Her breathing was ragged. You shouldn't have come. Neither should you," I said, pressing my hand over the wound. But she shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, you needed to know." She reached into her coat pocket and pressed a small flash drive into my hand. "Everything," she whispered. "Names, accounts, the people behind it all. I recorded everything before the party. They never knew. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, she didn't look like the villain. She looked like someone who had finally realized what her choices had cost." Her eyes drifted toward the horizon, where the waves were beginning to rise. "Funny," she murmured. "After all that, it still ends here." The wind picked up, howling through the dunes like it had that first night. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Heather's eyes fluttered shut, her hand falling limp against the sand. By the time the agents arrived, the storm had broken again. Rain lashed across the beach as they loaded her into an ambulance. Porter ran up to me, drenched and breathless. "She's alive," he said. "Barely. But whatever's on that drive." He looked at it, still clutched in my palm. "That's the endgame," I nodded. "She said it has everything." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Then this time, Marcus, maybe we finally win." Weeks later, after the arrests, after the headlines, after the noise, I stood on my porch again. The dunes were quiet. The sea oats had started to grow back. Nature, it seemed, was already healing what greed had broken. I buried the flash drive beneath the old survey marker, the one that had started everything. Because some truths didn't belong in the headlines. They belonged to the ocean. The tide came in, whispering against the shore, washing away the last footprints from that day, and for the first time in months, the coast was silent. The sea doesn't forget. It buries lies, it uncovers truth, and it always takes back what was stolen. If you felt that storm the way I did, subscribe to Tomato Tales and stay for the next story, because every tide brings another secret ashore.